Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're looking at Colossians chapter 2 verses 13 through 15, and this is the first easier passage we've had in a long time, so I'm personally kind of excited for this. I hope you are too. Just to give you a little bit of background about what we've been talking about, again, this big section from chapter 2 verse 8 until chapter 2 verse 23 is a big discussion on Jesus' sufficiency, why he's sufficient for the believer to give us access to God and right standing with God. And this is in contrast to all these worldly teachings that the Colossians were getting that told them that you have to do this special thing or that special thing in order to be right with God. Paul is saying all you need is Jesus and faith in him. And in our previous session, we talked about what happens at the cross. What happens when the believer comes to faith that makes us right with God. And remember, what God does for us is that he gives us a new nature and he removes the sinful nature. He takes away the body of the flesh. And in today's passage, we're going to talk about how that happened, how it was that the cross accomplished that. Now let's talk a couple key terms before I send you off to read on your own. First is in verse 13, you're going to see the phrase, the uncircumcision of your flesh. This phrase is actually a parallel statement to the one right before it, because Paul says you were dead in your trespasses, which is one that we're more familiar with. We see that also in Ephesians 2. You were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh. So there are two different ways of expressing the same idea. That is the spiritual deadness. So when Paul uses this term, the uncircumcision of your flesh, this is another way of saying spiritual deadness. And it has to do more with not belonging to God and being unclean, to kind of borrow from Old Testament terms. And then in verse 15, when Paul talks about the rulers and the authorities, most likely he's talking about spiritual powers. He's talking about angels. He's talking about Satan. So now that I've explained those key terms to you, I want to send you off so you can read on your own. And let me give you a question to think about. What does this passage tell us about what the cross does? So with that in mind, go and read on your own, pause the video, and when you're ready, come back and I'll give you a takeaway. Welcome back. So let me give you 3 takeaways about what the cross does. First is the cross secures forgiveness. When Paul mentions this record of wrongs that we had done that was nailed to the cross, it's saying that that record was wiped clean, that God doesn't keep track of all the sins that we did before we came to faith, but instead he just nailed them to the cross with Jesus. And that is to say, our sins are taken care of. They're done with, and we don't need to worry about them anymore. Second, notice again that Paul uses the phrase raised with him. And again, that's the idea that when we're united with Christ by faith, when we're made one with him, what happened to him also happens to us. So we were given new life because of what happened at the cross. And the third thing is victory. When God has victory through Christ over the rulers and authorities, over the spiritual powers. The cross is not just about saving us. The cross also is about God's glory. It's about him establishing his victory over every other spiritual power. And that's another reason why we can trust him, seeing everything that he's done for us at the cross and ultimately for his glory. So this is something that we can reflect on and use to deepen our perspective of who God is and what he's done for us through Christ. I hope that was helpful for you. I'll see you next time.